You see that one? Thank you. In case I count backwards. Good point, well made, thank you. Just to put me there. That's what officials for. So you're not just there to take the bullet, you're the also there to... Okay. Cause distraction. There's a squirrel. Any different questions? There's a few opportunities. Yep, there was somebody who Alex has said there was a wee man in a wheelchair over there that he wants to ask about housing.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to our annual review public session. It's nice to see so many people here. It's nice to see the sun shining this morning for this event. I'm Alec Lingston. I'm Chair of NHS Forth Valley, and we have at the top table the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport, Jean Freeman, and beside Cabinet Secretary is Fiona McQueen, the Chief Nursing Officer for Scotland, and to my right here is our Chief Exec, Cathy Cowan. Okay. So without any further ado, I'll pass you over to the Cabinet Secretary.
Okay, I'm going to come over there. Partly I'm going to come over there because there's a wee slope here, right? And we get through this next hour with the wee counting. We'll be doing good. So can I add my welcome to you as well for taking the time to come to the public session of the annual review. Public session is really important. It's your opportunity to ask questions to the board. There may be issues that are about national policy, and if there are, then I will be very happy to take those as well. The annual review itself of all our health boards is a very particular point in time, where as a Cabinet Secretary I have the opportunity to meet clinicians, to meet patients, to meet other staff through the partnership working that goes on in our health service, hear how they've been making progress, what they have been achieving, but also hear any concerns and issues that they want to raise. And we did that in December this year, and we now have this public session. So the annual review, as I said, comes in those kind of two main parts. We've done the first part, we've followed through some of those actions, and I know the board has taken those actions that we've asked of them very seriously, but it's now your opportunity to raise issues that you have, that you want the board to address, to recount good experiences if you've got them. They're always important, particularly for our staff to hear when the care that somebody's received has been exactly what the individual needed, but there may sometimes be ways in which we can still improve on that. So today will be led by Alex fielding the questions, and between us all, hopefully we'll be able to either address them here and now, but if necessary, to take your details and come back to you. If there are particular patient issues, if it is about you and you're happy to share that in a public forum, that's fine. But if it's about somebody else, then I'd ask you to think very carefully about not sharing details of an individual without their agreement and knowledge, but you could talk about the issue that is around that. That's absolutely fine. But we just need to make sure that we're protecting people's privacy and their confidentiality wherever we can do that. So with no further ado at all, then I'm going to hand back to Alex, and I think Cathy is going to give us a short presentation on the work that the board's been undertaking over the last period. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary, and a very warm welcome to you and to Fiona McQueen, and to you, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, at the 2017 annual review. I joined NHS Forth Valley in 2018, so whilst reflecting on past performance, I also want to share with you our current performance, and probably more importantly, talk about our future aspirations and what we plan to do going forward. I thought it might be helpful just to start off with NHS Forth Valley at a glance and just share some statistics with you, just to put that into context. So NHS Forth Valley is one of 14 geographical NHS boards, and we provide a range of healthcare services in collaboration with our community planning partners for our population of just over 305,000 people. In 2018, we employed just under 6,400 staff, and we had a huge budget of £570 million. During 2017-18, 3,099 babies were delivered in Forth Valley, 48,911 people were admitted to hospital, and 780,000 people attended as an outpatient, and just over 82,000 people passed through our emergency or minor injury services. We know that emergency presentations for the year 2018 is likely to increase by about 3,000, and we've obviously took steps to actually meet that demand. In primary care, where most of care is actually taking place, most support is taking place, we provided care to over 1.7 million people. So today, this annual review is really an opportunity, as I said, to look back, look at the here and now, and also to share with you our future ambitions as a board to ensure that we continue to deliver person-centred, safe and effective care. In terms of looking back, I joined, as I said, NHS Forth Valley in 2018, and like many other boards, we were faced with a number of quite significant challenges. Many of these were associated with high levels of flu and a very, very cold winter. And yet, despite these challenges, staff, communities, partners and local businesses together worked hand in glove to make sure that we continued to be able to deliver services to our patients. I witnessed again the NHS at its very best, staff working well beyond that call of duty, with many staying over in community hospitals and indeed here on this site. They did that to ensure that patients received the care and attention they needed, and they went about their work with a great sense of commitment and pride, and with some amount of sense of humour. Serco, our partners in this site, worked really closely with us, and they worked closely to keep up the service standards at a level that we could all be proud of. I see that same commitment every day in NHS Forth Valley as I meet with and I walk alongside staff and see their interactions with each other and indeed patients and colleagues. As I look back in 2017-18, I have to say I feel less proud. I feel less proud about the long waits that our patients have experienced. In cancer, against our 62-day target, we achieved a performance of just under 80%, against a standard of 95%. For patients in need of surgery, our treatment time guarantee performance was 66%. I'm pleased to say today that our performance is improving. Our 62-day cancer wait standard at January this year was 86.1%. I agree we're not hitting the standards, but we're making progress. As the Chief Executive, I'm committed to standing by these improvements and delivering real change. Equally, people in 2017 waited far too long for access to our child and adolescent mental health services. Our performance against a 90% standard sat at 45.5%. Similarly, in psychological therapies, our performance was 50%. Our 4-hour access performance was poor and frankly unacceptable. In the here and now, I'm really pleased to report that our current performance in child and adolescent mental health services and our 4-hour access standard have both improved. The CAMHS waiting time has moved from 4.5% to over 90% in January. Our 4-hour access standard has improved, and whilst it's still very early days, we're actually achieving 90% plus. Our focus now is absolutely making sure that these improvements are sustainable and that we keep our eye on the ball. We owe that to our patients, and indeed we owe that to you, our staff, because you're the people who deliver these standards. Moving on then, in outpatients and inpatients, whilst waiting times are improving, we have a way to go. We're confident the targets set and agreed with government colleagues in response to the Cabinet Secretary's National Waiting Times Improvement Plan, hatched with considerable investment, we will meet those targets. So at the end of March, our outpatient waits over 12 weeks will reduce to 1,800 compared to 2,350 in March 2017-18. And likewise, our inpatient waits over 12 weeks will reduce to 1,088 compared to 1,200 in March 2017-18. Delayed discharges remains an issue, but we've established really good relationships with our local authority partners, our integration authority partners, and this will be a key area of work that we will absolutely focus on going forward. Similarly, in psychological therapies, our performance has not moved that much. We are 53%, but the board acknowledged this and in January agreed to invest just under £250,000 in additional staffing to improve waiting times for patients. But I also wanted to share information relating to patient safety. Patient safety and the environment that we provide care is extremely important to us. We continue to achieve reductions in what we call our hospital standardised mortality ratio. That's a healthcare quality measure that provides the board and should provide the staff and the public with assurance about the appropriateness of our interventions, our care, and indeed our treatments. Healthcare associated infections also remain low. But this board absolutely doesn't sit in its morals. This board makes sure that it has robust infection prevention and control systems in place to ensure that we continue to provide high levels of safe care. In terms of compliance with cleanliness and the fabric of our buildings, we continue to achieve above 90% in each of these measures. That is extremely important to us. The environment that we deliver care in is just as important as the care that we actually deliver in terms of our staff. I wanted to also share with you some measures in relation to staff. Our staff-related performance. We've worked really, really hard to actually encourage people to get engaged, to actually almost shape their own future, to actually take permission and do things. And we've seen our I Matter action planning in our teams moving from 21% compliance to over 80%. Absence, however, remains static at over 6%, but I'm absolutely delighted that our staff side colleagues and Robert, our employee director, along with our union colleagues, are working with us to actually make improvements, to try and bring staff back to work, either in a different job, because people do want to get back to work and we want to support them to do that. But it's also good to get external feedback, and we've very recently, in fact this week, we've had some deanery visits, and the feedback compared to previous inspections is really positive. And again, a big thank you to Andrew, the Associate Medical Directors and colleagues in the room, because you have made those positive changes. In terms of achievements, the staff have lots to be proud of, and I'd love to take some of these achievements, but they're actually well underway before I joined you. We saw our Stirling Health and Care Village open. We've started work in our Doon Healthcare Centre. We achieved a gold rating in Investors in People and became one of 2 healthcare organisations in the United Kingdom to have such a rating. In addition, we were very proud to also receive a gold rating in recognition of the work to recruit and develop young people. And we celebrated becoming the first hospital in the country to receive a gold award for environmental excellence. And in patient care, Cabinet Secretary, you'll remember your visit to the maternity unit where we both met a young couple who were having their first baby when you visited our new midwifery unit. So looking forward then, Cabinet Secretary, I want to say on behalf of the board that we will remain committed to focusing on performance that delivers your priorities, notably to continue to improve the health of our population here in Forth Valley, and to use the government's financial uplifts to our NHS board to improve patient access and reduce waiting times, whilst focusing on that bit that matters to patients, that actually improves their patient experience when engaging with us. To help deliver improved performance and waiting times, we are well underway to deliver a local elective centre built here on this site. And that will support not just local waiting time activity, but also regional and national waiting time activity. This development has had the support of £18 million from Scottish Government, and already we have recruited the theatre nurses that we need to actually support that development, and we have been making really good progress in attracting both consultant anaesthetists and orthopaedic surgeons. We are on track, thanks to Gillian Morton, who's sitting in our audience, who's leading this work, and Scott Urquhart, our Director of Finance, to bring one of our theatres into operation earlier than planned. Finally, we remain committed to improving access to mental health services and gaining the benefits for patients and their families and carers through integration. We will, of course, do that by being an employer of choice, an employer that offers local jobs to local people, and opportunities to support our local economy, and being an employer that cares for staff and indeed our patients. I have told a story today, I've given you a narrative that actually shows improvement, but please be reassured we have still work to do, and we're committed to actually making those changes to improve the experience and the weights that you and indeed your families have. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Cathy. Now it's over to yourselves to ask any questions that you want. Can I say before we start, this whole session is being recorded for, is it Twitter? Yeah, Facebook, well, it's nearly like Facebook. So if you ask a question, it's up to yourself if you want to give your name, given that it's being recorded. You could make your own choice. Okay, who'd like to ask the first question? Don't be shy. Yes?
George McMeekan, a member of George McMeekan, a member of your very own Patrick Gilmartin's Dynamic Wheel joint initiative between the third sector interface and the NHS itself. One of the things I missed from the slide was it mentioned about child and adolescent mental health. Yeah, I'm currently a service user within the adult mental health service, and to be quite honest, it leaves a lot to be desired at the moment. Hence, I'm champing at the bit to get involved in partnership with NHS Forth Valley and try and do something positive in improvement of the services. Now, one of the things that we recognise is that the voluntary sector or the third sector generally works out with the public and private sectors. But we feel that, you know, as service users and citizens of Forth Valley, that we want to see the NHS not just existing but thriving and providing effective care. Obviously, I've got a bias towards the mental health field, and I've been a service user for 35 years, and over that time, the standard of care, unfortunately, has deteriorated. Now, all I would say just now, the main point in me speaking just now is just to highlight that case, and that if there could be a follow-up in some way that we can engage with the NHS Forth Valley, then I'd be really grateful for that. It's very easy to criticise performance and stuff, but mental health is a massive issue in today's lifestyle. It's not just a clinical issue, it's a lifestyle thing. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, and I can assure you we are taking mental health issues very, very seriously. It's a major priority for the Scottish Government, it's a major priority for our board, and we're keen to interact with people to improve the services that we've actually got. Cathy, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, hi George. We would absolutely be delighted for you to get involved. There is nothing better than people who use our services providing feedback on our services. We can guesstimate what the experience is like, but having real stories, real narrative from people who are actually accessing our services really shapes things in ways that are really person-centred. I'm really delighted to say today that we've been able to recruit to a number of vacancies in mental health consultant psychiatrists. And that hasn't helped things, if I'll be very honest with you, because there has been gaps. And I'm going to look to Linda Donaldson because I might get the number wrong, but I know that we've recruited a substantial number. It could be 6 or 7, Linda? 6.
Yeah. It's working. Push the button. Failed first one. So we have just recently recruited 6 psychiatrists. We have 4 general psychiatrists, a forensic psychiatrist, and liaison psychiatrists as well. So we have just been recruited over this last month. Okay, so really good news. And Cathy has been telling us that we're the calibre of the people who we've recruited is absolutely fabulous. So good news all round.
And getting involved in that, George, will be really, really important. So commitment today, we've been in touch before, so you know my email address, so please get in touch and we'll pick that up. Yeah.
Angela, sorry, Angela.
won't need a microphone. I am Angela Price. I'm the manager of Falkirk Association for Mental Health, a third sector organisation that supports people with mental health problems. And I would like to say that I find that the NHS Board Family does work incredibly well in hand with the third sector organisation, certainly from a personal point of view. Financially, they support us, their staff are there if we need any advice, and vice versa, because we often give them quite a lot of advice too. So it truly is a partnership, I think, between the statutory and the third sector. And I think they complement one another very well, because not everybody needs to be within the statutory sector, and I think that NHS Board Family recognise that, hence the partnership working we have with them. Hope that's a positive thing.
Okay, thanks for these comments. The lady. Right.
I think I'll need Hi, I'm Lynn McDonald, and the issues I have are not with NHS or Family Hospital, but or patient care, etc. with the hospital, but with one of your partners, like Maius and the Stirling Healthcare Partnership, and it's the care and support system. And these are personal issues that I have experienced since the 19th of October, and it's all to do with management failings. I believe there's going to be a meeting afterwards where I can have a meeting and discuss the personal issues that we have. So I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I just want to put it forward that there's a lot of issues.
Maybe, yeah, I don't think we can deal with personal questions, but I'm a member on the Stirling and Clackmannanshire IGB, so I'll be very happy to speak to you after the meeting. I'm not saying I'll be able to answer your questions, but I certainly will take up the issues.
And I would support Alec in that very much, so yes.
Philip Gaskell, recently retired GP and chair of ArtLink Central, who have a service level agreement with NHS Forth Valley. Thank you for updating the figures. I looked at the initial list and thought, well, 12 months out of date doesn't go well. I want to address a couple of issues, if I may, and offer my sympathy and support, because the figures are difficult. And when I came to watch the board discussing those at the end of January, you made that quite obvious. To quote the chairman, we're sinking. He was talking specifically about psychological therapies, which we've seen here, and it was drawn out that clinical psychologists are difficult to hire. And I think it's very important that these messages get out there. I got a coffee on the way in, I'm afraid I brought it in here, and I talked to two junior doctors. I had them talking about the risky environment of general practice. It gets riskier and more difficult when psychological therapies are that much farther away. The pressure builds. The patients come back quite reasonably. GPs do want to review patients in difficulty. I came across a neighbour I hadn't known a couple of weeks ago. She's kinship fostering her nephew, age 6. He's waiting for CAMS, and he's waited for a long time. She's got 2 of her own children, and she turns out to be a single parent. So there's definitely a personal element to this. At the board meeting, it was encouraging. I was sitting next to the one other attendee, and she turned out to be a young journalist on the BBC Local Democracy programme. 10 of them in Scotland, placed with NewsQuest and Johnson Press and so on. And she was able to put 3 articles in the Stirling Observer about the board meeting on the following Friday, and 3 in the Friday after that, including We're Sinking. So she was able to report that to the public, because they do need to know that this is difficult. It is possible to go back to minutes a year ago, once you put your anorak on, and note that you offered aspirations back in the first quarter of last year, which are almost identical to what you're offering now. That is the level of difficulty that we face in the NHS. And I think transparency is really quite important. When one turns up to a board meeting, one is presented with that at 9 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's quite a lot to digest and make any meaningful listening for. So why is that? Why do we give the public such a hard time? Obviously, we've got a different setting here. So my encouragement, but I think encouragement for transparency and honesty. It would be interesting to hear the comment if we know how CAMS managed to get their waiting times down so dramatically. Is that a redesign? Is it more staff or whatever? There are sometimes solutions that can make a difference. Thank you.
Yeah, just answer some general points. Yeah, the CAMS figure a year ago wasn't clever. The reasons it got to that stage, and our performance, we'd put a lot of effort, a lot of scrutiny into these figures previously, and we're running around about 95%. It was a major surprise to us when we fell off the cliff edge. Didn't think I used the word sinking that day, but I've used it once or twice. But it was a combination, huge increase in demand and staff shortages, people leaving, people off sick, people on maternity leave. And it was these two factors coming together with a huge impact. And when you get that situation, you know, you're in the middle of the actual problem. You then got to try and understand why you're in that situation and recruit. I'm delighted to say that our performance now in the 95% level, and it'll be our intention to keep it there. But you know, things can happen, but we are trying to be a lot more proactive in terms of trying to anticipate, you know, demand and resource, so we don't get that sort of mismatch. But mental health services, I can assure you, are a major priority both for the government and for this board.
And maybe just to add to the Chairman's comments, we've actually got two people in the audience who were instrumental in turning around that performance, Gillian Wharton and Jacqueline Sproul. I met with them when I just took up post in relation to CAMS to better understand the performance, and they put forward a number of suggestions in relation to nurses doing things, to release more specialist staff to do other things. I thought that was very logical, and I thought, well, why not? The other thing to recognise in NHS Forth Valley is because we are a central located board, lots of people come to Forth Valley for very specialist services. So we've got a number of tier 3 services in CAMS where people come in from other areas in Scotland. And we have to really very quickly divert our attention to those children and young people with significant issues. And that can create variance and variability, and I think we really have to be transparent and recognise that. But I don't know if Gillian or Jacqueline, not put you in the spot, want to maybe tell the story, because I think it's important.
Yeah, I'll start. Actually, the real star of this is Jackie over there and her team. I mean, I think there's many different things that we've done. I mean, we've had lots of action plans which actually came to the end. We started working with our sort of Maius and Mental Health Access Improvement team under Health Improvement Scotland colleagues, and that was actually really good because that actually reassured us that what we did was the right thing. We had to look, the board did give us an extra another couple of staff to help give us a bit added capacity. The problem, I think, in CAMS, and it's nationally, and psychological therapies, is that the numbers being referred in is just climbing year on year. And that's been seen down south. There's certainly a lot of work done with the boards down in the Trust in NHS England to see if they could stem that flow, and actually we're seeing the same thing here. So that's quite difficult. The other difficulty when you've got a service like CAMS, and Jackie will be speaking a wee bit more about this, is about the referrals into the service. It's not smooth at all. So we know at Christmas time we are going to have a huge big number of referrals into the service. And I think we got an excess at 60 children. That's a lot of children to try and accommodate. So actually to smooth out that pathway is our next objective. We are meeting the target, and actually we have we've been meeting the target for the last sort of few months. Just to be transparent, I think we are getting to the stage where that these Christmas sort of hump will come, and we're going to have to reprioritise staff. So I'm not convinced we'll meet the target month on month. I think we will meet it for the next few quarters though. And one of the other things, and Kathy's quite right, we have an incident that's happened which has seen us having to support 9 children very intensively. And of course we've taken from the main service to actually flow out into that, and that's the right thing to do. But there's been a huge amount of work, and I'll pick up the engagement as well, because Jackie's worked really hard to try and work with our service users and third sector, and she's got an event that will be running quite shortly to encourage everybody to do more to support, because you're right, everything doesn't have to come to CADS. My psychological therapy colleague Sally up the back there is also doing exactly the same thing. So all the things were sort of done in CAMS, because I do CADS as well, but all the things we're doing in CAMS, we're doing the psychological therapies as well. But it's been not without a huge, big amount of work from Jackie and the team.
Could I also add that the Government commissioned Denise Coya to do work on mental health, and she's spoken to a lot of young people. Her report will be coming out shortly, and I think it's going to point the way, give us a lot of good information on how it should be done. It's not just about health services. A lot of mental health issues, the research shows that it happens in childhood, and if it's not adequately dealt with then it develops and then it gets chronic. So I think there's going to be a lot more work in the community and schools and colleges and such like, strengthen the role of the voluntary sector. So I think there's going to be a much more holistic approach to try and deal with it, rather than putting more money into the health services when a lot of problems are very acute by that stage. We need to go upstream and try and deal with it, when giving people support will help them deal with the challenges they've actually got. So it is an area that's going to continue to develop over the years and will be further funded.
Alec, can I just add to that? Because you're absolutely right. So although we're still waiting on Denise's final report, what is clear, and what was clear when we asked her to undertake this work, she is herself a clinical psychiatrist, was that part of the problem with CAMS and the numbers of people waiting was that there wasn't anything before that. So people, young people would have issues that may arise at home or at school, but there was no knowledgeable support to them in those areas. So things were unaddressed and get to a point where they either reach a crisis or they're in a long wait for CAMS. And I have to say, this board deserves, and the staff involved deserve, significant recognition for the turnaround that you've achieved in this. And I'll be really keen to see exactly what you've done, because that needs to be learned and picked up elsewhere. But one of the things that we've done as a government is found an additional £250 million to back the work that Denise is doing, and committed to introducing counsellors in schools to support young people, and also to support teachers and other staff in schools. The idea of the resilient school that can cope and help young people who may be experiencing mental distress. It may be a particular trigger, bereavement, or some bullying, or some of the issues that arise as you grow up. Counsellors in schools, counselling support, so we'll have counsellors in every secondary school, counselling support in further and higher education, and the development of what we've described as community-based mental well-being services. So it's not necessarily a building, but it's bringing services together to work well together for children and young people up to the age of 24. In schools, so last time I was here at Forth Valley for that annual review, I had the opportunity to hear about some work that's going on in the secondary schools about mental health first aid training that involved secondary pupils in years 5 and 6, training them and the work that they could then do to offer support to their peers, which is really helpful. So when we add counsellors into schools, it's not necessarily another person. Some schools have used the Pupil Equity Fund money, for example, to train up teachers to take on that role. So the counselling money could go in to backfill the teaching post, so that they're not losing out. In other schools, they've not done that, so it could be a specific additional member of staff. But all of that is designed to get the right support to children and young people at the right time in the place where they are, so that CAMS can then focus on those children and young people with more complex or more serious mental health needs and provide them with that particular specialist support. There's additional work going on in terms of adult mental health as well, but just on CAMHS, that's where this is all going. But I have to say, Forth Valley is leading the way here, and we need to see clearly, understand clearly what you've achieved, what you've done, because then I'll be looking at other health boards and asking them what they're doing about it.
Thank you. Who'd like to ask the next question?
Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary about consulting the public, because that's a government policy. People may not know that there's a website called Participatory Budgeting. It's about 3 years old. My understanding is that local authorities have a better track record in that than, for instance, health boards or health and social care partnerships. So this is a developing area. I had time to get involved in the Stirling Clacks Health and Social Care Partnership consultation, first of all on their 3-year vision and aspiration, and secondly on their budget, their draft budget for the year beginning next month. I have to say that it was disappointing. I went to one of 4 public meetings, and I think there were 10 of us there, and we got a pretty traditional account of what they were hoping to do. We got nothing on paper. There wasn't really any opportunity to do other than mention our favourite issue of the time. So again, we were dealing with information that was produced on the day. As far as the consultation on the budget's concerned, that was an online consultation which finished on Friday last. It was quite impressive as online consultations go, but it was all aspirational. There were no trade-offs offered. A trade-off is where you disinvest in one area and invest in another. There were no pounds, shillings and pence. When I asked why, I was told that that was because the budget figure, the overall budget figure, was not available. When I asked beyond that, I was told that Clackmannanshire Council had still not decided how much money they were prepared to provide, and that was under negotiation. I think most people know that Clacks Council is absolutely strapped for cash. So these are bigger issues than just the immediate ones, but they're real, and the public can not in any way grasp and influence when they're getting a consultation in March for a budget beginning in 1st April with only aspirational ideas, no figures, and no real questions about where to disinvest in order to invest. In other words, we're still very immature within health in terms of participatory budgeting.
So I actually think as a country we're a bit immature in terms of genuine public engagement and involvement. And I think that as politicians too often underestimate the capacity of the citizens we represent to get their heads around issues and come up with solutions. And where that is done well, then it proves incredibly beneficial. And one of the initiatives that the Chief Medical Officer has taken is to run a couple of what she described as citizen juries, where she's looking much further ahead. She's looking at the health service and the challenges of changing demographics, the nature of our population, the potential of new technology for some uses in healthcare and so on. And she's basically taking that to people and saying, so what do you think we should do about that then? So not taking a solution where folks are asked, do you agree with that or don't you agree with it, but taking the problem that needs to be confronted and asking folks what their solutions to that might be. And that does involve trade-offs. You're absolutely right. And it is foolish in a situation where any government has restricted amounts of money, there is no infinite pot of finance, to pretend that if you want to invest significantly in one area, you have to make a choice about what you're either not going to invest in or you're going to decrease the investment you have. So I completely agree with you that generally speaking, it's not particular to any one health board. It's not even particular to health, but let's stick with health. We're not as good at this as we need to be. There are some challenges in doing that because the folks that you need to be able to do it also have the day job of reducing the waiting times, of improving CAMS, of delivering healthcare in a ward or in primary care. So the timescales that you work with can constrict how much of that genuine engagement you can have. But what I've said is, I need us to improve how we're doing it just now. That doesn't mean we're going to get to perfect quickly, but we need to make some improvements about that. So, for example, Greater Glasgow and Clyde, in looking at their overall area that they cover about 21% of the Scottish population. They're a big board, lots of things that they have to do. That population is shifting and changing. Bits of it are getting older and living longer. Other parts are seeing an influx of young families, for example. So they have a programme called Moving Forward Together, and the way that they're going about their consultation is to hold a series of events with the public where they are putting in front of folks what are the competing priorities that the Health Board is trying to address, what are some of the solutions, possible solutions, that their clinicians and others have come up with, and then having a conversation around that. Now, that all takes quite a lot of time, and in fairness to that board, they're getting a bit of stick about how long they're taking. So sometimes you have to balance the two. The problem on the particular partnership, so just on the consultation thing, what I've asked for is a bit of work to be done about how we as a government can help health boards and health and social care partnerships improve public engagement, not just at times of change either, not just when there's a new service coming or there's a service change and a service is going to be less of it than there was before because something new is happening, but generally as a consistent part of the approach. And I need to understand what that means in terms of folks who work in health and social care and the big important job they have to do every single day. In fairness to that health and social care partnership, they probably genuinely couldn't give you that those pounds, shillings and pence numbers because of the timing by which government and then local governments set their budgets. And the timing of that in Scotland is determined in part by when the UK government sets its budget. So we can't set ours until they set theirs, till we know, because some of what they determine comes our way. So then we know the totality of what might have to spend alongside what we might raise by way of our income tax powers. We set our budget. Local government can't begin to look at the detail of its until we've done ours. And all of that is in quite a concertina time frame. And the ideal would be that you actually did 3-year budgeting, which is why I've said to health boards, you can do 3-year budgeting now. We can tell you absolutely what you're getting in year 1, and you have an indication that's your baseline for years 2 and 3, so you kind of know. Because if you look at any effective organisation in the public or the private sector, they work on at least 3-year timescales. Right? So that would be the ideal. The other complicating factor in health and social care partnership money is that money comes into the health and social care partnership directly from health and from local government. But in addition, this year I've put an additional £160 million into local government specifically for adult health and social care. Now, what I need to be sure of is that that money gets to where it needs to get to and doesn't go somewhere else. And so local authorities are individually elected democratic bodies. You know, I can't tell them what to do, but I can work with COSLA to try and make sure that that additional 160 million finds its way onto the ground into services. And that's what we're busy trying to do. But your points are well made and they're well recognised, and that's some of the constraints, but also some of the work we're trying to do to address those.
Just ask a question.
Yes, sorry. Yep.
Sorry, no, that's okay. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Jessie Ann Malcolm, Public Partnership Forum Coordinator across Forth Valley. I've done this role for 13 years now. Public engagement is my main passion. So sorry, Philip, but just to reiterate, we actually took the strategic plan for Clackmannanshire and Stirling out in November last year for consultation. We spoke at different events and we asked the public to contribute. We also had Patricia Cassidy, the Chief Officer, last September, came out to Falkirk with her vision and also going over where we were with that Health and Social Care Partnership. And then in November, Cathy Cowan, the Chief Executive, very brave, came out to the 3 events and spoke with the public. That's where she met George, who spoke earlier. So we had the 2 things going, but then in January, we then came back out. We had Suzanne Thompson, who's the Programme Manager for the Falkirk Partnership. We had Janice Young, who's the interim programme. So Janice's take on that was, you said, we've done, she showed the vision. Suzanne Thompson did the exact same thing. The event Philip mentioned, sadly there was only 10 people, but this was an add-on event. We went to Callander, we went to Balfron, we had a really good night in Ludgate House, and Ian Aitken, interim chief officer at that point, came along, and it was purely on the strategic plan, and we truly listened to what was said, because I feel it's very important. You should know that we have gone far and wide, and Cathy's uptake, which was fantastic. George himself had never met a chief executive. His actual words, we were all sitting thinking, well, what's he going to say here? And he said, your presentation tonight, wow. And that, she then met with him.
She's blushing now.
She's blushing.
She was going to blush quietly, but I thought I'd point it out.
No, but I feel it's important for the public, because I've got a lot of my public partnership forum. That sounds good, but there's members here today, and I'd like to think every one of you would back up what I'm saying here, because we have truly gone out and consulted with them so that they don't think it's just a tick box exercise. They truly have been listened to, thanks to the fantastic team of directors in NHS Forth Valley that are all here today. So thank you.
Thanks, Jessie Ann. Yes, do you have a question?
Yeah, there's a lot of pampering on the back here, and in the background, since the 19th of October, when all the issues that I've been having personal with, like Clackmannanshire and Stirling, all the Facebook, etc., that I've followed that, and I haven't been to any of those meetings, but the horrendous things that were happening in the background, which, well, I won't become public. We'll show you the 2 sides. One side where all these terrible things are happening, and what you're saying, it just doesn't equate. It just does not equate.
And I suppose that's why it's really, really important when I was doing my presentation, it's acknowledging when we get things wrong, because in actual fact we need to take responsibility and make the changes. So I'm really, really keen to hear your story, but also to and it's to have that conversation and to actually help make the changes where we can make these changes. And that goes back to Philip's point about transparency. So really, and thank you for that.
Yeah. So we very much welcome your input, your experiences. There are problems with Stirling Clack. So there's
what you've done. When are we going to get it? All I hear is no resources, no funding, we can't get carers.
And I think we need to stop talking about the deficit and actually, but I think meetings like this hold us to account as public servants. We've actually in health got a budget of £570 million. We need to spend that wisely. And the whole notion of integration, bringing local authority budgets to actually deliver something locally in localities, I think that's the prize, and we need to work faster and harder at achieving that. So I'm really keen to hear your story and actually to be held to account, because that's my job, to be held to account. Yes.
No accountability with Clackmannanshire, none whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot more transparency is required as well from everyone.
Thank you.
But can I just say that The hospital here has been magnificent.
Yes.
Magnificent.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Laura.
George Meekin again. Could I just make a point about the subject of funding? Everything within my experience, the subsector, is basically about funding. In order to operate within that sector, one of your first priorities is to raise the funding. The point I would make as a long-term mental health service user is that I had to give up my career through ill health, but I look upon it as my company pension is my own private funding. So I think something maybe for you to bear in mind here is that there's an army of service users out there in exactly the same position as me, who have got a lot of experience and opinions about how services could be improved. And what I've learned over the years is it's pretty easy to criticise stuff, you know, and I've kind of changed my tack on that. And what I'm looking at is to try and get the positives to the fore. But it's really frustrating when, like the lady says, that you come to events like this and everything seems to be, you know, you could, depending on your angle, you could be looking at it through rose-tinted specs. But we all know that, you know, the services are in some trouble. But all I would say, the point I'm trying to make here is that there's a wealth of self-funding within service users themselves, whether that's through private pensions or the benefit system or the walking wounded within the employment sector. You know, there's a wealth of people there whose time costs nothing. And I reckon that's an untapped source that you could make good use of in the future. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for these comments. Anybody got a final question? Sorry.
I am a member of the PPF group, which Jessie Ann mentioned earlier. And that is, as Jessie Ann describes it, it is a most valuable contribution to the health provision in Forth Valley. Because I won't go over it again, but the width of speakers, the quality of speakers, the feedback which we get from our meetings is very positive, and we do get negative responses as well, which have to be responded to. And I am very, very sad because at our last meeting, I understand that the group may be stopped. Now, I'm not certain about that. Jessie Ann could confirm, or perhaps our staff here. But that does provide an opportunity for people who go along. But I know a lot of people who go along to those meetings are then going back to the other groups in which they are involved, because invariably people in the community who are active in different fields, and the information is being cascaded to other areas of the community. And I would be very, very sad if that particular public engagement was to be axed.
So I'll respond to that. So would I be. So would I be, because actually somebody who's actively participated in those meetings, and it goes back to George's point. A lot of the issues that present to the health service are actually social issues, social isolation, people not feeling valued, people losing confidence, and actually it's these small steps that cost very, very little that can make the difference and become quite transformational to people's lives, to getting them into volunteering, to getting them into jobs. I kind of mentioned jobs in the passing. We are a huge employer in this area, and by giving people income, they can make choices about lifestyles and everything else. And I think personally, we've just come out from a meeting with lots of brigadiers, and I made that point. We have to be really clear in the health service about the economic contribution that we make to society and use it really wisely. I sometimes think that we cut sometimes the small things, like the cafe activities and so on, that cost very little at our peril, because that's where people come and congregate and make friendships and then make life choice changes and so on. So I'll pick this up outside the meeting, so thank you for raising it.
Yeah. Could I add to that assurance? There's been no suggestion at the board that it should be disbanded. I take customer patient feedback very, very seriously, so they need to be held for a good case. And it would need to be a better, an improvement, no just wiping it out, that it's never ever come near the actual board. So it may be a figment of somebody's daydreaming, but it's certainly far from reality.
Just really support Chairman and Cathy, and I see Jessie Ann there. So the problem is in Forth Valley we've got really good the information in terms of the PPF. We've also got patients working alongside us in important areas like person-centred and infection control. So we've got amazing infrastructure. I think listening to the Cabinet Secretary, it's probably how we do even more and bigger, and how we join up with our integrated joint bodies and other partners. But I think in terms of, as Chairman and Cathy said, in terms of health and is reaching into health and social care, we've got an army of people working alongside us, incredibly challenging. We all go into those meetings you know, expecting to be really challenged, and you support as an equal measure. So I think, and even if you go into the hospital at the moment or into community hospitals, we have patients and public representatives working alongside around infection control. We started on that journey a long time ago, and we've continued it, and we could never see a time where we had less engagement. It's probably more, and hopefully Jessie Ann's reassured about that. As Chairman and Cathy said, you know, we couldn't do our job. You challenge us to be even better than we could imagine ourselves to be.
Yeah, and we greatly value the work that they actually do. So no way will we just be discarding that. We'll be building on it, if anything. So you bring in Johnny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Johnny Casper. Several months ago, one of my neighbours was very ill, and they rang for an ambulance, and the ambulance took 6 hours to appear, and finally my friend died. And I said that to the family that I'd report this to the health service when I could, and so that's what I'm doing now. But it was quite some time ago. But I mean, the ambulance being 6 hours late after the telephone call was extraordinary, I thought. Thank you.
We'll take that up. Yes, Andrew.
Okay, could I just say that ambulance is not directly managed by ourselves. We'll pass on your comment, but it's a separate organisation that manages that.
Hi, I'm Robert Maius. I'm a retired healthcare architect. CAMS was mentioned, and I have an interest. I designed the CAMS unit at York Hill back in the 1990s, and I had work involvement with the one in the new Edinburgh Children's Hospital. I was contacted by the BBC asking if I knew what was going on with the Edinburgh Children's Hospital, because they are getting stonewalled with issues about delay. I mean, it's about a year late. And I put out feelers because I know most of the people working on it, and I also got stonewall. No one's talking about it. So can the Health Secretary maybe take this opportunity to update us? What is the problem with the Edinburgh Sick Children's Hospital? Why is it delayed? The BBC told me that the things were so bad the Scottish Government was going to intervene. Is that true, or is it just another BBC rumour?
Well, I can't be responsible for what the BBC come up with from time to time, or any other of our colleagues in journalism. The Edinburgh Sick Kids Hospital has now been formally taken ownership of it by NHS Lothian, and they're now in the fit-out stage, and they expect to have their first patients there from July, and then they'll phase in taking patients until they have it fully operational. Which is what you'd expect them to do. So what NHS Lothian had to do, though, was to just make absolutely sure, and I would expect them to do this, that any of the issues that had come up in terms of water and drainage at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, which required some changes to the fitments in the single rooms around sinks and so on, that NHS Lothian, before it took the new hospital, had taken proper account of those lessons and made sure that they weren't going to be in the same position. And I'd expect a board to do that, is to constantly keep up to date with any difficulties that might arise elsewhere and the lessons that are learned from that, and then apply it before you take a new build. And that was partly one of the issues that they had to address. They've addressed that now with the builders and so on to their satisfaction. They've taken the building now as being one that meets their requirements, and they're now kitting it out, taking the first patients from July.
Okay, I'll take the last question, Chairman, out the back. Give you the...
Yeah, I have a question about patient safety. I would like to be able to tell the audience about our experience as a family of patient safety at this hospital, but I think it would actually shock you all. I had a really, really terrible experience. Now, I understand that things are changing. There's a new, I think it's something like a voluntary coalition. The initials are PHASS, and I don't know how you would say that, when you normally sort of pronounce these things. But I want to know what was the background of the change that was made in that area. It's actually directed to the Cabinet Secretary, because I think the Health and Safety Executive have a new role now, overseeing healthcare in Scotland, which they didn't have before.
So Fiona McQueen, who's with me, is our Chief Nursing Officer for Scotland and is my lead advisor on infection prevention and control. Don't think Fiona's heard of this either, but I'll let her do.
It's certainly on the Health and Safety Executive.
And it's certainly something we could look into, but that's not something that we've had any notification of or that we've seen. I mean, clearly there are many standards that we conform to, and many that we create and develop ourselves in terms of our expert advisors, in terms of Health Facility Scotland or Health Protection Scotland. Was it around infection prevention and control you were talking about, sir?
No, not at all. It's just the general issues to do with patient safety and how accountable the NHS is in this country, because I think it is more accountable in England. That's what I get a sense of.
No, sir. So the Health and Safety Executive will come in to any NHS board. They could come in because we actually activate a RIDDA report, or if somebody approaches them. I'm thinking about if there was lots of falls of patients and so on, they can actually come in and do a visit and actually hold us to account. And what they actually come up with in terms of the recommendations is public knowledge, and we would be expected to and would want to comply with that. So our relationship with Health and Safety Exec, as with HEI and everything else, is we value external scrutiny, because sometimes when you're here every day, you can miss things, and I know that might sound dreadful, but we do as human beings, and it's actually great to have deanery visits and so on, where people come in and say, this is what I see. So the Health and Safety Executive, their presence has increased, and I actually personally think that's a good thing in terms of that external scrutiny. But happy to talk to you if that helps.
So the Health and Safety Executive have a UK role. They're a UK body and they have statutory powers. But so therefore what they do applies in Scotland, as Cathy has outlined. And they would come in on the basis of those kind of triggers. They'd look at things on that basis. But in addition, we have probably 3 main bodies that are involved with our National Health Service, our individual boards, Health Facilities Scotland, Health Protection Scotland, and the Health Environment Inspectorate. And it is that inspectorate that will do both unannounced and planned inspections of all or part of a particular health service in a board area. So it was the Health Environment Inspectorate that have recently undertook the unannounced inspection that I asked them to do at Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. And they then produce their recommendations. They are incredibly detailed, at what they look at. They look at the wheels of trolleys. They look at the hinge on a toilet seat. They look at everything, and they have very clear standards which boards and healthcare staff are aware of, and they then produce a series of requirements or recommendations which a board then needs to very quickly tell them what they're going to do to address those and fix those, tell me, and then the inspectorate will go back in to check. And I'm right in saying, I think, that this is a health board that has not had, following any of those inspections, any requirements. In other words, the Healthcare Environment Inspectorate have come in and have looked at the facilities, how people do hand washing, the availability of clear signs about what needs to be done, and a whole raft of things, and they've never found anything here that they said was deficient and needed to be fixed. Now, that's what I'd expect from a health board, but it is to Forth Valley's credit that that's the case. Now, what they've got to do, and some of the stats they showed about infection rates are good in any effect, but they're good compared to when you look at the Scottish standard. Now, obviously, what the expectation is that Forth Valley will keep that up.
So can we
But
clarify,
that doesn't take account of.
Am I the only person in this room that knows about this new voluntary coalition of groupings? PH.
Well, we will look at it, but it's not something that we've been informed of until you've raised it, sir. So we'll go and have a look at what that might be and how it might work and how it might help us to ensure that we keep infection rates down, and where infections arise, that we control them. But in addition, I'm sure that if you've had a particularly difficult experience yourself or your family, that again, Kathy and Alex will want to know what that is and look and see if they can address it. Yes.
Yep. Could I say that as a health board, we have many priorities, but patient safety is the top priority for us as a health board. There's no doubt about that. Patient safety is our #1 priority. And if there's anything you think that we are deficient in, then please let us know and we will look at it. But I'm not aware of anything that we are not doing that we should be doing. In terms of infection control, I'm put my hand on the heart and say, you know, our hospitals are as safe as a hospital can be. We put an awful lot of effort into dealing with the infection. The staff are totally committed to. It's impossible to make it zero for a whole variety of actual reasons, but we get as close as zero as it's possible to actually be. We've got a very dedicated team dealing with it, and we've got our procedures are very safe. So Cabinet Secretary said there's not been any instance, and I know from the scrutiny we do through the board and its committees, there's a lot of attention given to patient safety and infection control in particular. Okay, sorry, do your last question.
Just a quick thing. I mean, we work with the health and safety executive design the hospital.
Yes.
But they, to my knowledge, they have no intervention role other than if an incident has taken place.
That's right. That's right.
So, in terms of infection control and patient safety, we put the wash and bathes at emphasis. We can do so much, but it depends on the staff. And I think it's interesting that there's a report about using disinfectants, actually creating antibiotic resistant bacteria, being overzealous with health infection. And you're also getting feedback, you know, the gels, some nurses are starting to get hand conditions. You can go too far. You wash your hands in a basin, that's the easy way. You use the elbow taps. I know there was issues out at the Queen Elizabeth with the taps, because I was working in the neurosciences building doing a couple of wards there in the theatre suite, and we were getting told to change the taps. And I spent Friday night reading your report. All were playing air, but I was reading it. I was at an architect's point of view, there's things jumping off there, like the waste bins in the corridor that were locked when they should have been unlocked when they should be locked. I'm asking, why have you got waste bins in the corridor? That's a fire hazard. That's supposed to be a disposal hall room with 1 out of half are weighted walls and doors. That's what's required for building regulations. So why? So the comment I would say that maybe you need to get the fire officers going round with the infection control people. The other thing jumping off there is that big issues with management. That management are not talking. Someone thinks the cleaner should be doing it, someone thinks the nurse should be doing it.
Yeah.
People are not talking. You need to have, speaking as an old colleague here, you need to have a dedicated team that goes round either once a week or at specific times. Usually you have a staff meeting at the start of a shift.
Yes.
You design routes for the staff shift, the shift changes over. You should discuss.
Yes, we do.
There. We do. I was designing a maternity unit in Northern Ireland, and I speaking to a paediatrician who told me that an incident he saw, a neonatal care unit, where the nurse came in, washed her hands, taps, went across to the incubator, and she did like that. And he went, whoa! Stop.
Yes.
That's the problem. You do things without thinking. And Mark Armstrong, when he was chief medical officer, told an interesting story that you've got an intensive care unit, you've got relatives coming to see someone who's weak, you've got all sorts of fires, isolation rooms, positive air pressure, all sorts of things. The first thing they do, they walk in straight off the streets and kiss them directly on the face. They said, transferring microbes right into the air passes. But how do you stop that? You can't prevent people, to see a relative. There's only so much you can do. And the thing is, I think it's interesting what's happening, that we're now going to the other extreme where we're disinfecting things too much. Yeah. We might have to have a review of how what directions infection control is taking.
Yes.
Is actually not making a treatment higher risk to the patient as opposed to a lower risk. So the other thing that's going to is a bit of a negative pressure isolation. I mean, that's a given. But you've got, I've designed a cancer Italian law which was built in 1955. You've got positive air pressure because the child is immunosuppressed and so you keep the air flowing out of the. But when you've got someone who is infected, you need to keep the air flowing in the way. Now, the fact they didn't seem to have one in the field, I find that astonishing. But
yeah, I think you're starting to become quite technical. So we've got our facilitators.
If there's any comfort to any of you, I knew what he was talking about. I know what he's talking about. Not as much as you do, sir, but I've been reading those reports as well.
Our facilities director here, he'll be pleased to tell you about what we're doing. Okay, well, thanks very much for your actual questions and your attendance. Big thank you to the Cabinet Secretary and the Chief Nursing Officer for coming today. Thanks very much for that. Thank you. Could also say a thank you to all my staff for organising today. Thanks very much. We'll give them a round of applause as well. Okay, thanks very much. Chief Executive himself won't be out. Very attentive.